Oh, completely. And we need to recognize that there are huge lessons to be learned in understanding the wider geopolitical picture that is now changing in front of us. I asked 6 months ago for a NATO division to move into Ukraine so we can actually defend democracy, not to start a war, but to prevent it. It's the one asset that Putin actually fears, and that's the formidable NATO alliance. But we actually declared publicly that we would not use them simply because Ukraine was not part of NATO. I remember serving in Bosnia. NATO wasn't part of Bosnia there, but there was a commitment to European security. And now we are playing catch up. We're actually reacting to events rather than getting ahead of them. And the big question is, when do you stand up to Putin? Do you, make sure that you hold him back today, or do you allow him to advance and end up having a bigger battle later on when you realize what his intentions are? Things won't stop here. Let's make this very, very clear. Putin's ideological intention to expand his sphere of influence will go way beyond Ukraine. So with a lot of head scratching for the West to do, to realize that we need to recognize what we believe in, what we stand for, and what we're willing to defend.
Mr. Elwood, my colleague Robert Moore has a question for you. He's sitting beside me.
Yeah, it's clear, it's Robert Moore here in the studio. It's clear that we're not going to get engaged in a sort of military sense in Ukraine, not even in imposing a no-fly zone. What would your view be of whether we should engage in the shadows? For example, should we engage in cyber warfare against Russian forces who are on the ground in Ukraine or who are poised on the borders? What about cyber warfare as a sort of shadow option for GCHQ, for the NSA? Is that something you think is on the agenda, should be on the table?
It absolutely should. We should recognize that there is a massive amount of sub-threshold threat that Russia provides, and also don't distinguish between main military engagement. We seem to, as you're implying, segregate, conventional intervention versus cyber and so forth. Russia doesn't operate that anymore. Their doctrine, their protocols mixes all this together. The civilian and military attacks and so forth is all part of the same collective. The character of conflicts has changed, but our response to it has not. We're still fighting, if you like, in the same characteristics as we've done in previous wars. There are many ways that we can provide assistance to defend Ukraine and Ukraine's sovereignty, other than simply putting in boots on the ground. But I would go back and say, we need to reconsider this no-fly zone, let's say west of the Dnipro River, because that would change the optics here. Yes, we will be looking Putin in the eye and saying, are you going to ratchet this up? But I make it very, very clear, if we don't stand our ground now, where will this go? And don't forget, there are other adversaries around the world, namely China, watching very carefully how the West reacts here. And if we seem to be timid, if we seem to be risk averse, China will take full advantage of that weakness too.
All right, Tobias Elwood.